Thank you. Is the mic actually working? Are we good? Yeah? Well, first of all, I cannot tell you really how thrilled I am to be here. It was a long ride from Philadelphia. I think it's now a 7-hour plane ride. But anyway, it's so great to be in Chicago. And I totally love being in Chicago because, I don't know if you all know this, but Chicago is sort of the center of the universe when it comes to doing what's right for kids. So congratulations. No, I really mean that. I mean, it was in Chicago that you started the Erickson Institute, right? And Barbara Bowman, I think she came from Chicago, all right. And Kate, you know what you're doing with the ounce, right? It's unbelievable. I mean, it's just breaking ground everywhere on how to do it right and how to work with politicians and policy. So boom, you guys are totally amazing. Liza, I don't know how you do all that you do. You must not sleep. But, but with Erickson Institute, and you had your own consulting company, I don't know if you still do, but just incredible. She was there and was one of the people who helped us document what went on at the Ultimate Block Party. Of course, it's all coming out of Chicago. Okay, so I want to thank you because I really am very, very excited to be here and to tell you about some of the latest research that we're doing. And I'm going to have to go back and forth because we don't have a clicker. So I'm going to be a little bit stuck here to the podium, which I don't love to do, but what the heck. I promise to be out in front at least a little bit. So I wanted to start by having a clap along. And I'm going to start it, and then you just do what I do. Oh, and Lonnie, I didn't say thank you. Mwah! To Fan, of course, for even thinking that I belonged in that distinguished group. Thank you so much. And for putting up with all the nervousness today of would my plane take off. Okay, so is everyone ready? Do what I do. That was magnificent. I mean, I can quit now. No, okay. So the reason that I wanted you to do that is because you all say, hey, that was sort of fun, you know, that was just play. Okay, when you say something like, oh, that was just play, we were just playing around. Do you notice the just that comes in there? Like, it's not really all that important. It's just play. Okay, but the truth is, if you think about it in a little bit deeper way, when you're just playing and clapping, well, you're doing rhythms, right? And you're not just doing rhythms, you're actually carving up time. And you're carving up time in a way that's sort of like what we would ask people to do when they were learning fractions or decimals. Oh, it's much more impressive than we ever thought, but we don't think of it that way. And I'd like to suggest today that it may be time to change the lens. Time to change the lens so that we start to see the math in clapping. We start to see the time and the rhythm in clapping. And we realize that it's a pretty sophisticated behavior. In fact, you had to wait until I was done before you started clapping. I think they call that impulse control. Well, in the old days, we called it impulse control. Try it with your kids. You'll see they'll just start clapping, right? But in modern day parlance, we call that executive function, okay? All right, so let's try one more. What's going on here? Well, it's really easy, right? We know what's going on. Dress up corner. That's the thing that we're taking out of the schools now, right? Because we don't need it because it's, well, you know what I'm going to say. It's just play. But I'd like to suggest to you that there's a lot more going on if you're willing to change the lens and see your world in a very different way. When a kid is dressed up and trying to become King Arthur, well, like there can only be one King Arthur, right? Somebody else has to play the knights at the round table. So that means you have to figure out social roles. And those social roles are critically important for how you're going to navigate your way through the preschool and kindergarten day. And I would suggest even the business day, we have to have those kinds of roles as they grow up. And I'd like to suggest that when they're telling stories to you about King Arthur and what King Arthur did, the great King Arthur, as he made beautiful rules throughout the land and, of course, even found Queen Guinevere, that in Camelot on that day, that King Arthur was creating a narrative, a story. And the story had actors and actresses in it. And in that story, we had a lead role and we had people who were taking secondary roles. And when they do that, they're forming the basis for literacy. And they're using amazing words that they might not have ever thought to use before, like moats, shields. Look at the vocabulary that you can get as you're playing King Arthur. You're doing perspective-taking language, and you're planning what's going to happen in the next scene or the next episode. I ask you, you'd be pretty pleased if I came to you at the end of my day, right here in a school as beautiful as this, and said, well, today your children learned planning skills. We practiced their language skills. They did role-taking and perspective-taking, and we did a lot of pre-literacy. What did you do? Just? Okay, so maybe there's more to it. Maybe we should take this thing called play a little bit more seriously. And I'd like to suggest today to all of you that it is time to change the lens on the potential role of play in education. Now, I'm going to say some stuff that I want to be very clear on, so let me put it out there right now. And that is, I believe in play even if it's just free play. I think we all need more time to play. Do you agree? Yeah? This is not just about kids, it's about us as parents too. And I should tell you, by the way, that the most important part of my bio was not said in my bio. So here it is. You forgot. Most important thing. I have 3 wonderful sons, okay? And that's the most important part of my bio. And what we had to do is we had to carve out time, especially as the workplace has come in to invade. It doesn't just encroach anymore. It invades our life. You're always waiting for that next text message to pop up. Seems like there's always another email. And when we are looking at the email and looking at the text message, who aren't we looking at? We're not taking time to look in the eyes of our children. They don't need us 24/7. Well, they sort of feel sometimes like they do, but they don't need us 24/7. But they need us when they have us. And it's because we don't take any time off anymore, that we don't have any time for play ourselves. And so we keep thinking, oh my God, with the time we have, we better fill it with something really important, not just. Okay, so you get the sort of message here that we're going after. And I'd like to suggest that to have parents and policymakers see the social and academic value of play, we have to recognize not only the importance of having free play, but also that there's a richness in a play and a playful learning curriculum that can be so rich in what kids can learn if we could only see it. There are days I wish we could have those ruby slippers and just click them together and go, oh my God, I never saw what was going on when my kid came home and played King Arthur. Well, I'd like to move on to some interesting facts. I'm just going to take you on a short digression here, but I think it's a really important one. One, we are leaving the information age when factoids was enough. By the way, I just heard this wonderful factoid the other day that I have to share with you, that every 15 minutes, that is from the time that you started sitting here and Lonnie and I started talking, enough information was generated in the world out there that it would have filled everything that Shakespeare could have possibly known in his entire lifetime. Isn't that amazing? Every 15 minutes. It's impossible then to keep up. We are entering what's been called in the business world the knowledge age. Are any of you in business? Any of you heard of the knowledge worker? Okay, it's a term that's being bantered around all over. Well, why? Because they say that knowledge is doubling every 2.5 years. So let's imagine that as teachers and as parents, that we honestly thought that our job was giving our kids a head start on the factoids, on the flashcards. That we somehow were going to open up the head of our child and pour the facts in. Well, I'd like to suggest to you that it will be futile. Let's imagine you could pour everything in that we know at this second in time in 2013. And I'd suggest to you, well, wait 2.5 years and your child will know only 50%. Wait another 2.5 years and you could see 5 years and you're down to 25%. It can't work. What we have to do is help our children learn how to learn. because things are just changing too quickly. And what's important today is the integration of information, the innovation in the way we think about information. So I would like to suggest to you that there are 6 skills we ought to worry about, and we're only worrying about one of them. And I call them the 6 C's. And it's becoming, for me, a kind of new report card for the future, because it really does help me and help others change that lens. Let me give you what they are. This is all, by the way, from the science of developmental psychology, but I think it applies even to us. Number 1, collaboration. We need to know how to work with others, to get along with other people. And our kids need to know how to get along with others. In the business world, we're talking about teamwork now. We're crossing geographic boundaries. In fact, there's so much information out there, we can't do it all alone. We must do it as a team, collaboration. We must have communities, and we must recognize and appreciate the diversity of those communities. Building on collaboration is communication. Communication, which includes, yes, writing, it includes, yes, reading, but it also includes speaking. Whatever happened to rhetoric? I don't even know any high school where it's taught anymore. And it's a very important skill. Oh, yes, it was Chicago that bred the rhetorician who is now our president. It's a very important skill. And mind you, I'd like to suggest that there's one that's missing from today's world, and that is listening. We teach our children to talk a lot. In fact, we blog a lot. In fact, we tweet everything that we do every second a lot, right? And I have never seen the things that I see on Facebook each night. It's amazing to me that we all believe that other people care what we did at 3:30 on an afternoon with our children. That is so egoistic, right? So I think we have to learn to listen a little bit more. All right, that's the second C, was communication. Third C, content. All right, now you all knew content was important, right? You had that down. That's why you wanted to make sure that you went and bought all those fancy $79 toys for Hanukkah and for Christmas, right, or all the holidays, because you want to make sure your kid could memorize everything they needed to memorize. But as I said, it's not going to work anymore because we're in the knowledge age. And so content is important. You still need to know your multiplication tables. But it's not the only thing. And we are so razor-sharp focused on content that I believe we are missing the point as parents who are trying to prepare our children for the education of the future. And by the way, there is so much content that the real skill is learning how to sift through it. I mean, we could all go to the supermarket and we could buy everything on the shelf and bring it home and dump it in our kitchens. But if we don't have recipes, what good is it? Our children need the next C of critical thinking. They need to operate on that content. And when I move to number 5, I'm going to suggest to you that they need to have a vision. They need to have a voice that's their voice. And that's going to come from creative innovation, putting things together in new ways. And they can't do that if we don't give them the chance to do it. If they have to only know one right answer, they're learning in a way that is antithetical to the new world order, to the 21st century. Learning is more like a map than a multiple choice test. And if it's going to be a map, there are many ways to get to an answer. Our children have to be able to make those mistakes. And they have to be able to find those multiple routes into the knowledge that they're going to need. And one more. I'd like to suggest confidence as my 6th. My 6th C, because our children have to take physical and social and intellectual risks. And we are so afraid of that we shield them and we force them into areas where they give one right answer. By the way, my very best example of this comes from one of the suburbs of Chicago. So here it is, Naperville. Did you ever hear about Safety Town in Naperville? Yeah? Are you from Naperville? I mean, give me a break, okay? No, I mean, seriously, when I was in Naperville, I've been there 3 times. I love Naperville. It is like the coolest area. You could practically eat off the streets of Naperville, okay? It's so clean and so quaint and so lovely. Do you really need to take the children out of Naperville into safety Naperville, which is little Naperville where they won't hurt their knee? I can't believe it. Anyway, I'd like to suggest to you that those 6 C's are going to be the report card of the future. And that what we need to think about is how to nurture each of those in our children. Now, Daniel Pink, who is an author who's written several books, and I absolutely think he's amazing. So I recommend to you A Whole New Mind. And he wrote it this way. The past few decades have belonged to a certain kind of person with a certain kind of mind, computer programmers who could crank code, lawyers who could craft contracts, MBAs who could crunch numbers. Don't worry, guys. If you're lawyers or MBAs, you're fine. You're going to do just fine. But the next line, I think, is really telling. Read it with me, if you will. But the keys to the kingdom are changing hands. I know you can do better than that. I heard you clap. We're going to try that again. Ready? Take 2. But the keys to the kingdom are changing hands. The future belongs to a different kind of person with a different kind of mind, creators and empathizers, pattern recognizers, and meaning makers. I saw something in the front of the New York Times about 2 weeks ago that blew me away, so I have to share it with you. It was this picture of a person, did you see it? It was amazing. This person sitting in front of 3 sort of huge computer, I guess they were just computer formats. And he's looking in front of it and waiting as the computer crunched all of its numbers. Now, I hate to tell you this, but the computers are better than we are at a lot of stuff. They're better at numbers. They're better at finding facts. The Google car has had only 1 accident, and it's when a human rear-ended it, okay? I'm very serious about that, okay? The computers are really good. Do you know why the person was sitting there? The computers needed the person because they needed his intuition. The computers are not good at intuition. They're not good at meaning-making and finding those patterns that are meaningful. So we have a role, okay? We have a role. I'm very happy to tell you your children will be fine, okay? But we need to make sure that we play up that role because the computers can sort of do the rest for us. Next, the partnership for the 21st century skills. They tell us that the society of the future is going to depend on our understanding of ingenuity, agility. These are the skills of the future, innovation. So you may be saying at this point, what does all this have to do with the way we raise our children? And I'd like to suggest everything. Because our children, the children in our preschools today, your children, they're the workforce of the year 2043. Oh my God, right? I mean, we don't want to think there. And really, I do understand that even as I say this. I remember as a young mother, it was the telephone company, AT&T. I think they were even called Bell at that time. That's how old I am. And they had a commercial, and they showed the kids growing up. And I was like in tears from this commercial. I couldn't watch it. So I really hear what I'm doing. But in 2043, they're going to be the workforce of tomorrow. How are we going to prepare them to have fun today, to be kids today, and to be prepared for tomorrow? So I guess I'm not going to shock you with what I'm going to say, but here's what I believe. I believe they need to play more, and I believe they need to have playful learning. Okay? Playful learning. And by the way, some of the best example of playful learning is right here in Chicago. Okay, well, you know I'm going back to it, and you know what I'm about to say, right? Children's museums. Children's museums. You have 3, am I right, guys? Is it 3 in the area? 3. What other city has 3 children's museums? All right, you're back to Chicago, because you get it. So that's a place where playful learning goes on all the time. It holds for all children. It holds for the kids, whether they're rich or they're poor, whether they're urban or whether they're rural. It holds whether you're in US, England, China, Singapore. When I gave a talk in Singapore, I expected people were going to shoot me. And they didn't. They said, oh, yeah, no, we know. It's really important to have playful learning. All children need an environment that is going to allow them to learn content through play. So the question that is before us now is, whatever happened to play? All right. Recent research suggests, and this, by the way, is from David Alkine in an article that he wrote in 2008, in the last 2 decades, children have lost 8 hours of free play per week. Thousands of schools in the U.S. have lost recess. I mean, whatever happened to recess? It prompted in January of 2013, we had the American Association of Pediatrics had to write a white paper telling us that we need to bring recess back. And it's actually not just important for exercise and for losing weight. This is not just a Michelle Obama thing. Children learn better when they come in from recess, especially boys. And the research is absolutely clear here. A recent report from the Alliance for Childhood was 2009, talking about whatever happened to play. Their most recent, by the way, that came out in 2013 is, why are we spending all this screen time? We can deal with that in questions and answers if you like. They did an observation in 142 New York classrooms, 112 classrooms in LA. What they found literally shocked me, and I hope it will shock you as well. They suggested that 25% of the teachers in Los Angeles said when they were surveyed that they had 0 time for play in their, let me remind you, kindergarten classroom. They had no time for play. 61% of the teachers in New York said they had 30 minutes or less, 81% was LA's figure, for time for choice time, for letting young children choose what they wanted to do as the next activity. 79% of the New York teachers and 82% of the LA teachers told us what it was that they're doing with the time that used to be playtime. They're doing test prep. Test prep. And around the country, by the way, as we have more and more accountability in the form of taking tests with one right answer, we're spending days preparing our children to learn how to take tests. One of my favorites was when I was in Florida several years ago, and somebody said to me, you must deal with this. And I said, deal with what? They said, the FCAT pledge. What's the FCAT pledge? I asked. 3rd graders were asked to stand up for weeks, put their hand over their heart, and recite, I will do my best to get a good night's sleep before the test. I will make sure to eat a good breakfast before I take the test. I will be alert and attentive when I take the test. I mean, they report in the New York Times that 3rd graders were in tears because they're so scared about the test. And of course, the people who won all the awards for making their schools absolutely amazing in Atlanta? Need I say more? All right. There are several recent articles that also have talked about the loss of play. Scientific American, I love this one. It said, play-deprived childhood disrupts normal social, emotional, and cognitive development in humans and in animals. Did you know goats play? Monkeys play? The only group that's taking play away is us. And we're taking it away from our children. I'd like to suggest that we are wearing our children out by engaging in drill and kill activities, even at the youngest ages. And here's what I really think we have done wrong. We are testing for factoids rather than testing for real learning. They can't stand it anymore. They're telling you. Are they telling you, Mom, don't take me to the next cooking class. I'm so tired. Okay, but we nonetheless sign them up for everything. And I know your area of Chicago must be just like mine in Philadelphia, right? We all signed them up for every sports class. I loved it. I mean, we had kids signed up, my own included, for the 3-year-old soccer game. Now, let's face it. It ain't soccer. Right? I mean, it took forever for these kids to get the idea that there was a team. And at the end of the day, they thought they were on the same team. Team meant kick ball, okay? Didn't care what shirt you were wearing. You find a ball, you kick the ball. And whatever's closest to you, you kick the ball in what's closest. Done. Okay? But it doesn't stop us from making them exhausted. All right. Now, these issues prompted in 2008, before they wrote the one on recess, the American Academy of Pediatrics decided that play was so important, it was so diminishing, that they had to write something on diminishing playtime, even for adolescents. I think our society, therefore, is confusing learning with memorization and test scores with success. And I believe that this is our moment in time. It is our time to strike a balance between the kinds of learning that we need to do in content and to add the other C's: collaboration, communication, critical thinking, creative innovation, and the confidence to take intellectual and social risks. That's the kind of kids that we want. I'm going to take a digression just for a moment here, because then I will move on and show you that this, honest to God, really, truly works, and you don't have to be worried, because they'll do just as fine in the tests. But I remember one day when David Elkind was my age, and he came to Philly, and I was so excited that he was coming to Philly. I mean, he had pushed the hurried child, and I said to him, "It's really not the hurried child, David, it's the hurried parent. Let me tell you, I have, at that point I had 2 kids, and I thought I was going to die just getting out the door in the morning. Seriously, it felt like I was a success story. If at 9 o'clock my kids were at school and one of the 2 had had breakfast, I was seriously golden. So, and David and I were having dinner. We were having dinner, before this talk. And he said to me, he said exactly the wrong thing. He said, "I don't understand why parents are taking their children to blah, 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 blah." Okay, and I said, "David, sit down. I'm about to tell you why we all do it, because when you hear that everyone else in the neighborhood has taken their kids to everything else in the neighborhood, you believe that your child is somehow going to become retarded if you don't take them to everything else in the neighborhood." I mean, right? Am I right about that, guys? You're like, really? I was petrified. All right, so now I can tell you that I stood fast. And my 3 kids are all grown up and in their 20s now. This really works. Okay, so now I have to give you the data, but I had to start with a personal story here. All right, so let's go through some of the data. I promise not to bore you too much with it, but I want to quickly go through a talk which will now have 5 mini parts. One is early education is really important, but as we think about it, we must put in the 6 C's, because how you learn is as important as what you learn. How you learn is as important as what you learn. Then I want to define playful learning for you, what I mean by it. Remember, I still believe in free play, but I'm also going to talk to you about something like playful learning. I want to talk about how playful learning works in self-regulation, how it works in academic outcomes, and some of the implications. Let's start with how you learn is as important as what you learn. Preschool experiences. We've looked at it for rich kids, we've looked at it for poor kids, and we know that it increases collaboration skills by as much as 62%. I mean, you can imagine that, right? When your kid is at home and you're the one who's doing everything for them, or you've hired someone to do everything for them, they're not going to learn to get along real well, right? Because whatever they want, they get. So it's okay if sometimes another kid goes on the swing first. Communication skills and language skills by 25%. Content, by the way, reading by 59%, writing and math by 50%. Now, these numbers are more elevated when you're in low-income environments, like the group that the OUNCE works with, than when you're in high-income environments. The positive effect that preschool attendance has on pre-reading skills, especially for low-income children, is comparable to or larger than the effect that homework has on school achievement, lead poisoning has on diminished IQ, and the effect that asbestos has on cancer. It's big. It's big. So when you hear the stories that are coming out from the administration today about universal preschool, and I think it was even written into the budget that came out yesterday or today, okay, know that this is a big deal. If we are serious about wanting to narrow the gap between middle class and low income folks, there is one way to do it. And by the way, you know that the economic models all came from Chicago with Professor Heckman. Okay, I mean, you know, it's all about Chicago. Okay, so, but I'd like to suggest to you that we need to turn to how you learn, not just what you learn. And there have been comparisons between those folks who do developmentally appropriate instruction and what I'll call direct instruction, or DI and DAP. And these schools and stories tell a story that I think you need to know. Developmentally appropriate environments are those where you have active, not passive learners. All right? It's the kind of stuff you see at Children's Museum, where kids are actively playing with something, doing something. They're active, they're engaged, and then the learning is meaningful. It's a whole child approach. So we don't say, oh, now it's time to do reading, and now it's time to do math. We don't do that. Instead, we plan a birthday party. And we say, how many children do you want to come to the birthday party? They have to count to do that. They have to write on the invitations. They have to figure out how much cake they need to order so that they can feed all the kids who are about to come to the birthday party, or how many bowling lanes they need if they're going to have that many kids at the birthday party. When they do that, they're learning math and they're learning reading, but they're learning it in a whole child-integrated kind of curriculum. But what's even more important than that is the philosophy that we hold of our children when we do that. And the philosophy is that you don't believe your child comes to you as an empty vessel to be filled with facts, but that the child comes to you as a discoverer and an explorer who's going out to find out what the world is all about, with all of its beauty and all of its glory. In more direct instruction, learning is more compartmentalized. They're the schools you visit where it's paper and pencil and they have stars on the walls. Have you seen them? Okay? That's what I'm talking about. And they take an approach which is more of an empty vessel metaphor. Child empty, your job director. Okay? So in the first one, you're a coach. In the second, you're a director. Now, we've looked at the difference in these developmentally appropriate schools and the direct instruction schools, and what do we find? Well, for social-emotional development, we find that there's higher emotion regulation, less child stress, fewer behavior problems, and increased motivation for school. They want to go if it's active, engaged, and meaningful. And academically, here's the trick. Academically, the kids do better from these environments than they do in the direct instruction environments. And these advantages last all the way into the primary grades. What happens in these DI classrooms? Well, you get more inattention. They don't have recess anymore. I mean, they're chomping at the bit. They have less confidence in their own ability, less enjoyment of classes, and end of year progress in language, motor skills, and social skills is down compared to those in the developmentally appropriate settings. By the way, on the same tests. On the same tests. One recent study looked at a Montessori education. It was by Lillard and Esquist. I think it was conducted in Milwaukee. And what they found out in these Montessori classrooms compared to the business as usual classrooms is that the kids in Montessori classrooms were better in academic tasks, better in social tasks that had peer play, and better in tasks that required attention to another person's beliefs. But here's the shocker. These were low-income kids in Milwaukee, just a couple hours from here. They didn't have the Montessori education up from age 5 to age 12. They were just back in the normal everyday school. Whatever happened, happened. And they went back and tested these same kids. And what did they find? That at 12 years of age, those kids who had had the more playful learning, liked school more, were more creative in their writing, and did better in reading and math than the kids who had done the business as usual schools. Why? Because the kids were actively engaged and they were learning more through play. Another study. This was a study done by Adele Diamond and Steve Barnett, Thomas and Monroe. Both this and the Milwaukee study by Lillard and Esquist appeared in a journal that is the top journal in the world if you want to talk at scientific findings, the journal Science. Okay? They never even publish educational stuff. Well, they're starting to. All right? It appeared in Science. Okay? And that's what they found. And this was another study looking at a program called Tools of the Mind. Tools of the Mind is a program that does self-regulation, and it teaches self-regulation by saying, you be a listener, and I'll be the speaker. I have the mouth, you have the ear. And then we'll switch. Now, I have the ear and you have the mouth. And you get to talk. Oh, now let's play a game where we count. And we'll count what we can do as a fireman or a fire person. I don't know what we call them anymore today. Anyway, as firefighters, right, there you go. Thank you. All right, so as we play these games, we're learning. And in fact, we're learning self-control. We're learning impulse control, and we're learning that ever-important executive function skills. And when we learn emotion regulation, and when we learn executive function skills, guess what it translates to? Better scores. You got it, in reading and in math. And it came from playing through the school day. A recent meta-study looked at 164 other studies, pulled them all together in one mega big study, and looked at the trends. And what did they find? That discovery learning or playful learning trumped both explicit instruction and unassisted discovery learning. Notice, by the way, it trumped both. So if you have learning goals, and I'm going to come back to this, it's not just about going out and letting kids romp in the backyard. Important thing to do, but not if you have learning goals in mind, okay? But it also trumped explicit instruction, okay? That direct instruction that I was talking about. All right, so what do we mean by playful learning? Well, I'd like to suggest to you, and we're now calling it also adult-supported learning, but I want to tell you what it is and what it's not. So you can imagine an environment like, if I may pick on, I'm sorry to constantly be picking on you, but it's such a good example. The children's museums. It's not like just a big hall where everybody goes in and can do whatever they want. People thought out very carefully what the exhibits ought to be in a children's museum. So it's adult-initiated, got it? All right? But once the kid comes into it, it's child-directed. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay? So the kids have agency in these environments. Even though I'm the one who thought up the environment, they're the ones who guide themselves through it. Everybody there? Okay. So we can imagine an environment that is child-initiated and child-directed. Got it? I'll call that free play. Very important. I can imagine an environment that is adult-initiated and adult-directed. I would call that direct instruction. Okay? And when I try to sweeten it up, which some people are trying to do now, Jacob Habgood came up with a perfectly wonderful term. He called it chocolate-covered broccoli. And I'd like to suggest to you, by the way, that a lot of our electronic toys, and I'm going to go into that in a moment, the so-called educational apps, I mean, you can't take a worksheet and just put it on an iPad, put some pretty pictures on it, and then decide that all of a sudden it's playful learning. It's not. It's chocolate-covered broccoli. All right? Everyone got it? Now I want to give you the other two, which is I could have initiated by a child, but then you come along. By the way, we all do this as mothers, so, you know, just get ready here. So, right? You've seen yourself do this. Kid says, I want to play blah, blah, and you go, and then you take over. Yes, that's a great idea. Let's make an airport out of the Legos. Okay? That's called co-opted play. Okay? And then there's what I'm going to call guided play. And that's where the adult, like in the children's museums, have thought out what they want for this exhibit, but the kid really takes the agency of going through it. All right, so everybody got that basic idea, definition? Does that help? Yeah? All right, I haven't lost you yet. So guided play, it seems to me, happens in two different kinds of environments. One is when I have a planned environment that I've carefully thought out, where children make their discoveries as they go through. And a second is when adults enhance children's exploration while we're playing with blocks or while we're playing with written material. And we're there as kind of supporters of what they want to do, asking them questions and egging them on. All right, so let's look at it. What do we know about self-regulation? It's a story about two Spocks, okay? And of course, I guess you all know, Michael Spock, Benjamin's son, lives in It just keeps coming back. I mean, I really couldn't make this up. If I was, Lonnie, seriously, if I were somewhere else, I'd have to say the same thing. It all comes down to this hub of the world for children called Chicago. Okay, so we all know Benjamin Spock really got it. He knew that social, emotional part of the world was really important for young children. And we all know that Mr. Spock did not. He did not have an emotional bone in his body. But it's really, really important, it turns out. Emotion regulation is important for impulse control, for self-guidance of your own behavior, for planning what you're going to do next, for self-reliance, and for socially responsible behavior, like not kicking the kid off of the swing in the playground. And it turns out that having good emotion and self-regulation, this social stuff, has everything to do with your later academic outcomes. In fact, there was a wonderful survey that was done a couple years ago of kindergarten teachers. And they said, what's the most important skill that a child needs when he or she gets to kindergarten? And do you know what they said? They didn't say brilliance. I know that's shocking. They did not say knowing the names of all the dinosaurs and when they lived. Nor did they say knowing negative numbers. They said social emotional regulations, persistence, task mastery, academic achievement, social cooperation, moral maturity, all comes from being able to control your impulses. Now I'm going to give you a shocking finding. If you haven't ever looked up this Michelle study, you need to do it. You just need to do it. It is called affectionately the marshmallow study. And here's what we did to your children. Actually, it was when we were all children. But anyway, here's what happened. So we have 2 marshmallows, and we put them in front of a kid, okay? And we say, hey, I have to go out for just a minute, but I will be back. Now, if you can wait until I come back, you get both marshmallows. If you can't, it's okay. Ring this bell, and I'll come back, and you get one of the marshmallows, all right? So the kid's sitting there. You got to watch these videos. I'm serious. They are delicious. There's like a couple of them, they're going, Then one girl goes, oh, you know. And as you might imagine, it's usually the boys going, ding, 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 ding. Okay, they can't do it. So it turns out there was dinner with Michelle and his son. And he said, hey, you know, like all developmental psychologists, I'd run this marshmallow study with like all of your friends when they were little, and now they're all going to college. Where's everybody going? And started talking about it. He said, you know, it's really interesting. Seems that the kids who did really terrible in the marshmallow study aren't doing as well in getting into college. So they did a study. They actually followed this up with the kids who had been in the real marshmallow study. And they looked at it, and they found out that the kids who had delayed gratification got 200 points more on average on their SAT test. Is that amazing? Now, would you argue this is an important skill to have? Okay, I rest my case. All right, I told you about the tools of the mind. It's one way in which we're going into schools now. Elena Bedrova has a huge program. There's some scientific controversy on this right now. We don't know how it's absolutely going to come out, but the best evidence we have to date is that getting kids to have more self-control, and this seems to be one way to do it, does raise that emotion regulation and I guess your SAT scores many years later. Point is that EQ, the emotional quotient, it doesn't develop on its own. It needs us. And we believe so much in that sea of content that we haven't spent as much time on the sea of collaboration and the sea of communication. And so I'd like to suggest to you today that we do so. Because it's really, really important. And our kids learn it from us. They learn it from the models in our environment. And yes, they learn it from play. All right, but what about these academic outcomes? I want to spend a little bit of time on it. Because we're so busy outsourcing, whether it's to the iPad or whether it's to the apps on our phone. I mean, it's amazing to me how much we are outsourcing the learning to other devices. I haven't been on a subway in years in New York where I haven't seen somebody hand over their phone so the kids could play some intellectual game with their kids. So we stopped telling stories. And we all have stories to tell, and stories build narrative. And I'd like to encourage you to bring that back in your life, even if, yes, even if you don't believe that you're a professional storyteller. You are. Think about what you do when you come home and you speak to your friends on the telephone. Think about what you text. You will not believe who I just saw in the store. I have not seen her since high school. She does not look any better than she did then. Okay. All right. So there you go. And it even has a character. We can do a lot by telling stories, by engaging in dramatic play, by playing board games. Believe it or not, by playing board games, we help our children learn estimation and number. So this stuff really does work. And in fact, a recent paper by Lillard that was talking about how we really don't know a lot of the connections right now. We're just starting to learn between play and outcomes. The one place we do know them is in dramatic play and in language outcomes. Now, I want to take an example from my own work just to show you some of the stuff that we're doing in our lab. It's on T-books and e-books, all right? Now, at that time, the e-book was the console book. Do any of you remember that? It's history now. But it's hard to believe. Do any of you know when the iPad came out? Any of you know? 2010. Really? It's only 2.5 years old, right? And we've all adapted to it already. But it used to be, if you wanted electronic books, you had these things, and you had to nest them in a console. And the messages that we got from our work on console books, I think, speak to what's going on with e-books generally. But it turns out that e-books are owned by about 95% of us, okay? 95% of us have e-books downloaded on some device. And it turns out that when we read traditional books, we do something different with our kids than we do when we hand them the e-books. We actually sit next to them. Oh, that's already big, okay? And the next thing we do is what we call in our field dialogic reading. That's just a fancy term. But the fancy term means we have conversations with our kids about what's going on in the book. And it's not just about what's going on in the book, it's what goes on beyond the book, okay? So think about it. Curious George, yeah, look at that. He just went to the zoo. Do you remember the last time we went to the zoo? Got it? That sort of stuff turns out to be really important for building vocabulary. All right, so we wanted to look and see what was happening with T-books and e-books. And we wanted to know, does reading an e-book promote the kind of dialogic reading that seems to be so important for language growth? And the answer was simple. You see it. No. We looked at 83 and 5-year-olds randomly assigned to matched E or T books. And when they were reading T books, the parents talked more about the story. When they talked less about behavior, and they talked more about what went on beyond the story. In fact, one of my students labeled this paper, which is now, we hope, submitted for the last time, labeled it Induced ADHD. When the little kids were reading these electronic books, and we stuck all these games and junk in the middle of the books, and you had all these things you were supposed to press, and they screamed vocabulary words at you, guess what? The kids totally had no idea what was going on in the book. Isn't that interesting? They didn't know the storyline. They didn't even know which characters had appeared in the book because they were constantly disrupted. In a follow-up, we asked the kids to tell us the plot line, to give us the sequences of events in the story. And we found out that the kids who had read traditional books with their parents did better at that than the e-books. Now, the issue is probably not e-book versus T-book. It doesn't matter whether something's digital or it's not digital. What matters is the construction of the book. So when you look at books next time, look and see, did they put all these games in the middle? Okay? Or did they decide that maybe they should let you read the book and then have another mode where you could play some games about the vocab? We're doing current research on this as well. This is being done in low-income environments, Head Starts, where we're reading a book and then we're putting children in one of 3 conditions. After we read the book, they either get a free play condition, where after they read Knights and Dragons, they get to play with a castle and a shield and a moat. Or we put them in a directed play where we tell them exactly what to do, or we put them in a guided play condition. As we are finding constantly, the free play is great, but it's not coming up to the level of where you have playful learning. We had one other quirky finding here, and the quirky finding is an interesting one, but I don't want to spend much time on it. Just to say that those parents, remember, they were all low-income parents. But those kids who came from parents who had a little bit of college did much better in the guided play condition. Those kids who came from homes where the parents had only part of a high school education did better in the directed play condition. And we're trying to sort out some of the reasons behind that now. That's just the results. We're going to move on. What about the all-famous STEM? I'm very happy that it became STEAM. Did you see the addition of the A recently? Thank God. Maybe somebody's paying attention to the arts. At any rate, here are the games that we can play finding patterns. I spy with my little eye a rectangle. But these kind of games are important for helping our children learn things like shape, conversations around playing with blocks, and I'll show you some examples of that in a minute, and playing board games. So again, I want to take you back to our lab. This is something that's being done in collaboration with not only Temple University, but also the University of Chicago, where we are part of the Spatial Intelligence Learning Center. And we're trying to get the message out that talking about space is really important. In, around, through, under, over. Because talk about space has everything to do with later mathematical skills, even beyond baby geometry. So let me show you what we have. We decided to look at block play because one day I got an urgent call from some friends of mine in New York. Mayor Bloomberg was considering taking the blocks out of the classroom. Now, who would think that in 2010 or 2012 you had to do a study to show that it was a good thing to have blocks in a classroom? But nonetheless, that's exactly what we did. And our question was, do we talk more about space when we play with blocks? Do we talk more about space in certain play situations over others, using those words like above, under, through, in, and out? So we had a design. In phase one, what we did is we broke the kids down into three conditions. One was pre-assembled play. And you know those toys that you get where the stuff's like already together? You know? And then you just get to play with it? Or you get to use some sort of a magnet and it puts three pieces on and then you're done with it? We'll call that pre-assembled play. Free play, we just give you the blocks, do anything that you want. And guided play, where we created a kind of almost IKEA situation, all right? And the parents and kids were asked to build a heliport or an airport. In the second phase, everybody was in IKEA, okay? And we wanted to know what would happen, what would generate more spatial kinds of language and information. And we got our answer on the results. The first thing I want you to notice here, it's free play, guided play, pre-assembled play. And remember that only some of the kids got the guided play first, okay? Can you see in the light gray that the guided gray bar is higher than any of the other gray bars? That's guided play. Now what we did is we switched everyone in the dark gray, we switched everyone to the guided play to go into a children's museum. What happened? Everybody shot up. Can you see it? It's really compelling. So what we found first is that the play context made a difference. In guided play, 10% or 1 in 10 words were those kind of spatial words between parents and kids that are going to build early math skills and STEM. Second, block play made a difference. In non-block play, parents only use 3 to 6% of the language that they use is about these spatial terms, so we pumped it. All right, what about shape? What about preschool geometry? Now, this may shock you, but if I ask you which of these are real triangles, and if it turned out that you happened to be a little dude, you would have only seen one of them with the point totally at the top as a real triangle. Go home and look at your books. Every real triangle in every one of the books that you have has a point at the top. But of course you know that that's not what defines a real triangle, right? That all these are real triangles, even if they're tilted, even if they're not isosceles. They're still real triangles. So we asked whether guided play might be a better way to learn preschool geometry, not just for triangles, but for pentagons and hexagons as well. All right, you got my story now, right? You starting to get the story? Guided play, direct instruction, exploratory play. In the guided play, we were going to say things like, oh, look at that. Oh, my God, look at that. There's something the same about all these guys. And the kids go, yeah, idiot. Can't you see it has 3 sides and 3 angles? Okay. Or we could be in directed play. We could say, hello, this is a triangle. It has 3 sides and 3 angles. This, too, is a triangle. And it, too, has 3 sides and 3 angles. Okay, so we could do stuff like that and direct them, or we could just let them play with the triangles. Then we put them in a task. And we give them Lilu the puppet, who only likes real triangles. Please make sure you only give her the ones that are real. And we ask the kids to do this procedure with typical, atypical, and non-valid examples. And you want to guess who did better in our test? Well, I guess you probably know the answer. Look at the blue for typical shapes. Can you see that at the end? On the left, guided play. Then you get didactic play, and then you get free play. Can you see what's happening here? But what's really interesting is that these kids also did better. You can't really see it because it's white, sorry, in the atypical situation. Even tilted triangles, because if you know the rules, then even if it's tilted, it has 3 sides and 3 angles, and you do better. We even have some recent findings that we've done with creativity. And it turns out that guided play fosters more creativity and less use of one right answer. All right, in some playful learning where adults initiate, but where children guide themselves, direct themselves through what we put up, it builds strong skills in self-regulation and in academic outcomes. Einstein once said, the only thing that interferes with my learning is my education. That has never been more true than it is today. All right, let's look at the implications. The implications are that you can have smart kids and you can have them learn and grow through playful learning. So imagine that your kids can be both smart and happy. That's like so cool, isn't it? Like they will go to Harvard, but they'll be well-adjusted human beings. This is, I know, it's so cool. I'm sorry, I should have said University of Chicago. I'm in Chicago, right? We also know that there's a huge gap between what we know in the science and what we are doing. And I'd like to suggest to you that it is way beyond time to close that gap. This is the first time in my life for the last 5 years. I mean, my colleagues actually come up to me and give me hugs now, and they say, thank you. There is consensus. In the field of developmental psychology, there's consensus. We never have consensus, okay? We're academics. We literally fight about everything, okay? We fight about the words that you start your sentences with, okay? But we're not fighting about this because we know the science of learning. And we know that if you have children focused, but you have it be fun, and your pedagogy is playful, the children will learn. In fact, I've said quite often that if we could just send children to schools that looked like children's museums, they would actually really learn something. Now, I'm on, you know, as you probably can guess, I'm on a crusade. So the first part of the crusade was to write Einstein never used flashcards because I thought, okay, our problem is that as scientists, we have been too quiet. We just haven't let people know what the science is. So what's a parent to do if they don't know what the science is? You know, how they can use what we've done in the lab in your own living room. We can't blame anybody for not doing the playful learning. So we wrote Einstein never used flashcards. And then we published Play Equals Learning, and we had a big conference up at Yale because we thought, we know what we'll do. We'll now get all the scientists together, and we'll have a big conference and invite people in. I will tell you, and you should do this here, and maybe fans should do it. It was so amazing. We invited a whole crew of people. We put up a list, you know, because we could take 150 people. We thought, you know, it'll take a couple weeks to fill up. We had 600 people by day one. It was unbelievable. Then we published Celebrate the Scribble that I did with Crayola so that people could start to see that in the scribbles of young children, you're seeing symbolism, you're seeing intentionality, you're seeing fine motor coordination. Then we published in 2009. This was really not meant to be a mandate for playful learning in preschool. I started out calling it a manifesto. And all my friends said, you cannot use that term. So it became a mandate for playful learning, where we put out all the evidence so everybody could see it, and then we had policy implications. We were getting bolder. And then if you want to talk really bold, on October 3rd, and Liza was actually there, it was amazing, right? 2010, we took over Central Park because we decided it was the hub of the universe. And what we would do is this group of scientists, can you even imagine this, right? We'd get together with corporations, we would get together with museums. It was unbelievable. Nonprofits, media, and we said, guys, we need to put this in the hands of real people. And the parks people said, oh, you'll be so lucky if you get 5,000 people to come. 25 activities, each of them born from a nugget of science. We were rolling, and boom, more than 5,000 people came. 50,000. Yeah, you can come too. And it was really amazing to see the science of learning in action. Just in the middle, I'll point out here that what you see is Lego had a really great exhibit, and all of the blocks were green. What's so cool about making all the blocks green? You had to use spatial knowledge to build whatever you wanted to build. You couldn't do it by color. All right, June 2011, we took the Ultimate Block Party to Toronto. We moved it on October to Baltimore. And it's just been really exciting to watch cities come together around the idea that play and playful learning work. This month, we introduced an online magazine. I hope you'll go and check it out, where we're trying to put the latest science again in the hands of all of you. We're calling it learnnow.org, and we would love your comments, but our hope is, again, that we can get the information the minute it comes out of the labs and share it with all of you. So what's the point? The point is playful learning can help our kids develop the 21st century skills. And the report card of the future isn't going to look like the report card of the past. I mean, Shakespeare's report card was great in Shakespeare's time. Horses and buggies were great when you needed horses and buggies. But we're beyond that now. What we need are the 6 C's. We need to think about helping our kids get along, collaboration, and work in teams. We need to think about communication, how they learn to speak, how they learn to listen, how they learn to write, and how they learn to read. Yes, content is important, but it's only one thing that's important, and it's not enough. If they don't have critical thinking, then we're never going to be able to use the massive amount of what we're now calling big data. It's overwhelming. One day on Facebook is overwhelming. 35% of your photographs are now on Facebook, growing constantly through Instagram. Think about it. We need to have that critical thinking. And that won't be enough because it's the Steve Jobs of the world who are going to make the next iPad. Who's going to be that next Steve Jobs? Who are going to be the leaders in innovation? It's going to be us? Or are we going to give that away to the kids in China who are remaking their entire education system because they don't want to be like us, because they know the factoids aren't enough? And we're going to be the ones to help our children take those risks, to help our children climb those jungle gyms and walk out of, I'm sorry to say, Safety Town in Naperville and see a little bit something more real. So I leave you by suggesting that in the knowledge era, our kids need to do more than just learn the facts. They need to integrate them. They need to be creative if they're going to solve tomorrow's problems. And I'd like to suggest to you that to reach her full potential, she needs to have a high-quality early education and beyond so that she can be the thinker of the future. And I'd like to suggest that now is our time. Think the 6 C's. And when you walk out of here today, change the lens and don't ever see it the same way again. Thank you.